Deep beneath the bustling streets of the city, a small, suffocating earthen chamber waits in absolute silence. Inside, a single cot sits beside a small lamp, a cruse of water, a little milk, and a single loaf of bread. This meager rationing is not an act of mercy, but a chilling legal loophole designed to avoid the direct shedding of sacred blood. The heavy stone above is sliding shut, sealing the occupant in total darkness to slowly starve or suffocate. This subterranean tomb lies within the campus celeratus, the evil field just inside the column gate. The condemned woman descending the ladder into this abyss is not a murderer, a traitor, or a common thief. She is a priestess who has committed the ultimate offense against the state. Her burial alive is a desperate, terrifying ritual performed by a society trying to cleanse itself of a profound spiritual contamination. She is one of the Vestal Virgins, the most revered and enigmatic figures in ancient Rome. Dedicated to Vesta, the virgin goddess of the hearth, these 6 priestesses were the spiritual anchor of the empire. They were tasked with a single overriding duty that dictated their entire existence: maintaining the eternal sacred fire that burned within the circular temple of Vesta. The Romans believed with absolute certainty that if this flame were ever extinguished, the city would fall. The journey into this unique social role began in childhood, far removed from the grim reality of the evil field. A girl between the ages of 6 and 10, flawless in physical form and born to free patrician parents, was chosen by the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Roman religion. In a solemn ceremony known as the captivate, he would take her by the hand, legally severing her from her family. From that moment the child was bound to a strict vow of chastity and a 30-year term of service. The timeline was rigid and absolute. The first 10 years were dedicated to learning the complex, ancient rituals. The next 10 years were spent performing those sacred duties. The final 10 years were devoted to teaching the newly chosen novices, passing down a tradition that predated the Republic itself. In exchange for this monumental sacrifice, the Vestals were granted a level of autonomy completely alien to other Roman women. Upon her selection, the young priestess was emancipated from the patria potestas, the absolute legal authority of the Roman father. She could own property, manage her own finances, and draft her own will without the need for a male guardian. She became an independent legal entity in a fiercely patriarchal world. Their emancipation manifested in extraordinary public privileges that visually separated them from the masses. When a Vestal traveled through the crowded, chaotic streets, she rode in a carpentum, a covered, 2-wheeled carriage, preceded by a lictor who cleared her path. Even the highest magistrates would step aside and lower their fasces in respect. Most remarkably, if a condemned prisoner caught sight of a Vestal Virgin on his way to execution, his life was instantly spared. The center of their universe was the Atrium Vestae, a sprawling, luxurious complex situated directly behind the Temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum. This secluded sanctuary featured a vast central courtyard lined with statues of the senior priestesses, elegant colonnades, and heated floors. Yet despite the opulence and the bustling servants, it was a gilded cage. Their lives were entirely circumscribed by the heavy burden of their sacred duties. The most critical of these duties was the constant, unblinking surveillance of this sacred fire. This was not merely a symbolic hearth, it was the literal manifestation of Rome's eternal life. The priestesses worked in shifts day and night, ensuring the flames fed on oak wood never faltered. The smoke rising from the temple was a visual reassurance to every citizen that the gods still favored their great civilization. The punishment for failing in this singular task was swift and deeply humiliating. If a priestess fell asleep on her watch and the flame died, it was considered a terrible omen for the state. The offending Vestal was taken into a darkened room, stripped and brutally beaten by the Pontifex Maximus himself. Afterward, the fire had to be painstakingly rekindled using the friction of a sacred wooden drill, resetting the spiritual clock of the city. Beyond their religious duties, the Vestals wielded a hidden, secular power that shaped the course of history. Because of their unimpeachable sanctity, the Temple of Vesta served as the most secure vault in the ancient world. They were entrusted with state treaties, crucial political documents, and the last wills and testaments of Rome's most powerful men. To tamper with a document held by a Vestal was an act of unthinkable sacrilege. Julius Caesar famously deposited his will with the chief Vestal. Decades later, Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, committed a shocking violation of this sacred trust. He illegally seized the will of his rival Mark Antony from the priestesses and read it aloud to the Senate. The document revealed Antony's deep ties to Cleopatra and Egypt, instantly turning Roman public opinion against him and sparking the final decisive civil war of the Republic. The echoes of their untouchable status frequently altered the political landscape. When a young, defiant Julius Caesar refused to divorce his wife at the command of the ruthless dictator Sulla, he was marked for death. It was the intervention of the Vestal Virgins, utilizing their immense moral authority, who successfully petitioned Sulla to spare his life. The dictator relented, though he ominously warned them that there were many Mariuses in that young man. But the terrifying flip side of this immense power was the constant looming threat of the evil field. The vow of chastity was not merely a personal promise, it was a matter of national security. To break it was to commit incestum, a crime considered a direct pollution of the sacred fire and the city itself. A Vestal's purity was inextricably linked to the military success and agricultural prosperity of the Roman state. Whenever Rome faced inexplicable disasters, devastating plagues, or crushing military defeats, panic would grip the populace. The Romans believed such calamities were the result of a breakdown in the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. Desperate to find the source of this cosmic anger, the Senate's gaze often turned toward the temple of Vesta. Whispers of unchastity would begin transforming revered priestesses into convenient political scapegoats. This grim dynamic was starkly illustrated following the catastrophic Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. The brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal had annihilated a massive Roman army, leaving the Republic teetering on the edge of total collapse. The city was engulfed in terror and despair. In their frantic search for a spiritual explanation for this slaughter, the authorities discovered, or perhaps fabricated, a scandal within the Atrium Vestae. Two Vestals, Opimia and Floronia, were accused of incestum. The swift and brutal justice that followed was designed to appease the terrified masses and restore cosmic order. One was condemned to the subterranean chamber in the Campus Saleratus to be buried alive. The other, avoiding the horror of the slow, suffocating death in the dark, chose to take her own life. The state had found its sacrifice, and the gods were deemed pacified. Their existence was a profound paradox. They were arguably the most powerful women in the ancient world, commanding respect from emperors and generals alike. Yet their high-stakes lives were entirely dependent on maintaining an impossible standard of absolute purity. They were revered as living embodiments of the state, but they were also hostages to its fortunes, always one military defeat or malicious rumor away from a horrific execution. Even the most mundane aspects of Roman religion relied on their hands. The Vestals were solely responsible for creating mola salsa, a sacred mixture of roasted, spelt flour and purified salt. This substance was sprinkled on the heads of every animal destined for state sacrifice. Without the Vestals grinding the grain and preparing the mixture, the entire machinery of Roman religious appeasement would grind to a halt. After 30 years of service, a Vestal reached a difficult crossroads. She was free to lay down her sacred fillets, leave the Atrium Vestae, and even marry. However, by this time she was a woman in her late 30s or 40s, accustomed to immense wealth, profound respect, and total independence. The prospect of submitting to a husband's authority in a traditional Roman marriage was unappealing. Most chose to remain in the order until death. The twilight of their hidden, powerful existence arrived with the slow, inexorable rise of Christianity. As the new faith gained imperial favor, the ancient pagan traditions were systematically dismantled. In 394 AD, the Christian emperor Theodosius dealt the final blow. He officially disbanded the order of the Vestal Virgins, seized their considerable assets, and ordered the eternal fire, which had burned for over a millennium, to be permanently extinguished. As the historian Zosimus recorded, the closure of the temple was not without its final dramatic defiance. An elderly Vestal, witnessing a Christian woman mocking the sacred space and stealing a necklace from a statue, cursed the intruder, prophesying ruin upon her family. It was a bitter, tragic end for a lineage of women who had carried the spiritual weight of an empire on their shoulders. The ashes of their sacred fire have long since blown away, and the Atrium Vestae lies in ruins. Yet the legacy of Rome's Vestal Virgins endures as a testament to the complex, often brutal nature of devotion and power. Their extraordinary lives reveal a society that demanded ultimate sacrifice in exchange for ultimate reverence, forever cementing their place as the silent, powerful guardians of the Roman soul.